The air in the Pereira family dining room smelled of roast turkey and old secrets. It was the 70th birthday party of the matriarch, Donna Lydia, and the joy was forced, too loud. The moment the cake, with its sparkling candles, was placed on the table, the cacophony of happy birthday began. That's when it happened. Anna, the 10-year-old granddaughter, who until then had been standing in a corner swaying gently, stood up. Her eyes, which seemed to see a different world, fixed on her grandmother. And with a clarity that pierced the music, she pointed and shouted, "They lied to you." The singing stopped abruptly. A glass of wine slipped from an uncle's hand and shattered on the floor. All sound was sucked out of the room except for the echo of those 4 words. And all eyes turned to Donna Lydia, whose smile froze into a plaster mask, her face drained of all color. "From which city or country are you joining us today? We want to hear your voice. If you believe that children are sometimes the only ones who have the courage to point out the naked truth, sign up." The story of the secret that this family has kept for 50 years is about to be revealed. For Beatrice, Anna's mother, her daughter's cry was the detonation of a bomb that she had felt ticking throughout her life. Her outburst that night was not one of tears, but of dizzying and terrifying clarity. While her brothers and cousins tried to hush up the incident, she doesn't know what she's saying. It's just one of her episodes. "Beatrice, control your daughter." She couldn't take her eyes off her mother, Lydia's face. That petrified face was confirmation of a suspicion that had always lived in her heart. Since childhood, Beatrice had felt an inexplicable melancholy in her home. It was like a cold draft on a hot day, a dissonant note in a familiar song. There was a sadness in her mother's eyes that no birthday party or Christmas present could erase. There were old photographs that disappeared from albums, names that were mentioned in whispers and then abandoned, rooms in the house that seemed to carry an invisible weight. She grew up feeling like she was walking on thin ice, with something deep and dark just below. All her life she had been the peacemaker, the one who smoothed over tensions, who kept up the facade of a happy, united family. And she had tried desperately to teach her daughter Anna to do the same. She tried to teach her the social rules, the little white lies, the convenient silences. But Anna's mind didn't work that way. Anna didn't see the social masks. She felt the emotional truths underneath. To Anna, the forced joy of the party was an ugly, garish color, and her grandmother's hidden pain was a high-pitched, unbearable sound. Her scream wasn't an act of malice, it was an act of desperation, an attempt to make the unbearable sound stop. That night, as she drove home with Anna sleeping in the back seat, Beatrice's outburst was a silent dialogue with herself. She was torn between the protective fury of a mother, wanting to defend her daughter from her family's misunderstanding, and the hungry need of a daughter who, for the first time, felt she was close to understanding the source of her own mother's sadness. Anna's cry did not break the silence. It just made it impossible to continue ignoring it. The Pereira family was proud of their history, a narrative carefully constructed and polished over decades. It was the story of hard-working immigrants who built a life from nothing, of a long and happy marriage between Lydia and her late husband, of united and prosperous children and grandchildren. That was the official version, the family myth, and Beatrice's false hope, throughout her life, was that one day that story would become true for her too. She grew up looking at the picture frames that adorned her mother's house, black and white photos of her grandparents, sepia photos of her young, smiling parents, color photos of Sunday lunches where everyone looked happy. She was taught to believe in that happiness. "We are a close-knit family," her mother always said. "Family is the most precious thing we have." This narrative was the glue that held everyone together, but it was a fragile glue. Any deviation from the script was quickly corrected. When a cousin got divorced, the subject became taboo. When an uncle went bankrupt, they pretended nothing had happened. The unspoken rule was, keep up appearances at all costs. Beatrice's hope was that if she followed the rules, played her role as the perfect daughter and sister, the feeling of displacement, the melancholy she felt, would eventually disappear. She hoped that by getting married and having her own daughter, she would finally be able to replicate the happiness in the photo frames. But the arrival of Anna, with her unique and honest way of seeing the world, made it impossible to maintain this false hope. Anna was like a tuning fork that vibrated painfully whenever a false note was played. In the family symphony, she didn't understand why people said one thing when their faces and hearts said another. And Beatrice, in trying to explain the inexplicable to her daughter, began to see the cracks in the facade she had worked so hard to maintain. Her mother's 70th birthday party was supposed to be the culmination of the celebration of this family myth, the definitive proof of their unity and happiness. Instead, it became the stage where the truth, through the voice of a child, finally destroyed the illusion. After the party, the fragile peace of the Pereira family shattered. Anna's cry forced everyone to choose sides, and the conflict that followed was a war between preserving the myth and seeking the truth. On one side was the faction of silence led by Beatrice's older brother Afonso. He was a pragmatic man who had inherited his father's desire to maintain order and appearances. For him, what happened at the party was a disgrace, a problem to be contained. "You need to take Anna to a better doctor, Beatrice," he said in a phone call the next day. "She's out of control. This can't happen again. You have to make her apologize to Mom." Afonso wasn't a bad man. He was terrified. He felt that the truth, whatever it was a threat to the stability of the family, to the business, to the inheritance, to the image they projected to the world. He saw himself as the protector of the family, and in order to protect them, he needed to silence the source of the problem, his niece and his sister. On the other side was Beatrice, now a one-person faction. She was seen as the traitor, the one who allowed the bomb to explode. Her aunt stopped calling. Her cousins looked at her with resentment. The pressure on her to solve the problem, to make her daughter fit back into the box of silence, was immense. The conflict was agonizing for her. Betray her daughter and force her to apologize for speaking the truth she felt, or betray her entire family in pursuit of a truth that could destroy everything? At the center of it all was the matriarch, Lydia. She withdrew into herself, a fortress of silence. She refused to talk about the incident, changing the subject whenever Beatrice tried. Her refusal to deny Anna's words was in itself a confession, but her silence was also a weapon. It left Beatrice isolated, without confirmation and without support. Lydia was trapped in her own conflict, the terror of having her deepest secret exposed versus the desire, perhaps, to finally be freed from it. Her inaction kept the family in a painful limbo. The human conflict was this tangle of fears: Afonso's fear of losing stability, Lydia's fear of facing the past, and Beatrice's fear of losing her family, or losing herself in the process of saving it. Anna, the catalyst for all of this, was the only one who was not afraid. She just felt the truth, and the whole family was breaking under the weight of that unspoken truth. The turning point did not come from a confrontation, but from a silent search. Tormented by her mother's silence and her brother's hostility, Beatrice felt a compulsive need to find proof, something that would validate her daughter's intuition and her own. One Thursday afternoon, she used the excuse of taking soup to her mother to go to the house where she grew up. While Lydia slept, Beatrice went up to the attic, a place that had always seemed forbidden and sad to her. The air was heavy with the smell of dust and mothballs. She began rummaging through old boxes, photo albums, piles of documents. She didn't know what she was looking for. After almost an hour, when she was about to give up, her hand found a small wooden box, hidden at the bottom of a trunk of winter clothes. It wasn't locked. With her heart pounding, she opened it. Inside, there were no love letters or secret diaries. There were only 3 items: a pair of blue wool baby shoes, very small, a yellowed newspaper clipping, dated 1968, with a small ad in the classified section that read, "Loving family seeks to adopt newborn, contact," and a single photograph, folded and fragile. The silent turning point was the moment Beatrice unfolded that photograph. The image was of a very young Lydia, perhaps 19 or 20 years old, holding a newborn baby in her arms. The young Lydia's face was not one of joy, but of such deep, overwhelming sadness that Beatrice felt a chill. The baby in the photo was not her, nor was it her brother Afonso. It was a third child, a lost child. Beatrice did not feel anger. She felt a wave of compassion so intense that it almost knocked her down. Her mother's melancholy, the secret, the incomplete family, it all made sense. "They lied to you," Anna had shouted. They were not Lydia's husband. They were probably her parents, Beatrice's grandparents, who, in the rigid society of the time, had forced her to give up her first child, born out of wedlock. She didn't go downstairs to confront her mother. The turning point was her decision to act differently. She picked up the box and went back to her house. She waited until the next day. Then she went to see her mother again. But this time she didn't go with questions. She went with an offer of peace. She placed the box on the kitchen table, opened it, and said softly, "Mom, you don't have to carry this alone anymore." Beatrice's gesture with the wooden box was the key that opened a door that had been locked for 50 years. The victories that followed were painful but transformative, rebuilding the family on a new foundation of truth. The first victory was the breaking of Lydia's silence. Faced with the box, the shoes, the photo, her mother's fortress crumbled. The tears came first, a flood of half a century of contained grief, and then the words. In a hoarse, broken voice, she told the story of young love, of an unexpected pregnancy, of the shame imposed by her parents, the story of a boy named Pedro, whom she held for only 2 days before being forced to give him up for adoption. The victory was not the story itself, but the act of telling it. For the first time, Lydia shared her greatest burden with her daughter. The second victory was Beatrice's understanding. She listened to the story without interrupting, without judging. She did not feel the anger of having been deceived. Instead, she felt a deep empathy for the young woman her mother had been, for the impossible choice she had to make. When Lydia finished, Beatrice simply hugged her. It was a hug that communicated forgiveness, acceptance, and unconditional love. In that hug, the dynamic of their relationship changed forever. They were no longer just mother and daughter. They were two women sharing a pain, united by a newly discovered truth. The third victory was confronting the family. Armed with the truth, Lydia and Beatrice called a meeting. Lydia, with a strength that no one expected from her, told the story to her other children and relatives. Afonso's initial reaction was shock and denial, an attempt to protect the old myth. But in the face of his mother's raw pain and confession, his resistance gave way. Victory was not immediate acceptance, but the beginning of a process. The family was broken, yes, but in an honest way. The artificial silence was replaced by difficult conversations, questions, anger, sadness, but above all, truth. And the final victory, the quietest of all, went to Anna. At a Sunday lunch a few weeks later, the atmosphere was different, quieter, more real. Anna, sitting next to her grandmother, no longer seemed so tense. Lydia took her granddaughter's hand and said, "Thank you, my angel. You set me free." Anna didn't fully understand the meaning of the words, but she felt the change. She felt that the ugly color of the lie had disappeared, replaced by the soft, sad color of the truth. And she smiled at her grandmother, a genuine smile of connection. In the quiet weeks that followed the storm, Beatrice found herself looking at her daughter Anna with a new kind of reverence. Her reflection was a complete reassessment of everything she thought she knew about autism, communication, and truth. For years, she had viewed Anna's condition through a clinical lens, a list of deficits to be managed, difficulty with social contact, atypical communication, repetitive behaviors. She, like the rest of the world, was focused on what Anna couldn't do. But the incident at the party forced her to see what Anna could do, and in a way that no one else could. Anna didn't have the ability to read the subtle social lies that held the family together. She didn't understand the need to keep up appearances, and that disability was, in fact, her superpower. Free from the filters of social convention, she was able to perceive the underlying emotional reality with brutal clarity. She didn't know that her grandmother had a lost son. She felt the grief, the hole in the family matrix. Her cry, "They lied to you," was not a logical deduction. It was a perfect translation of the pain she perceived in her grandmother, a pain caused by the lies of the past. Beatrice reflected on herself. She, the normal, neurotypical one, had spent her entire life feeling that something was wrong, but ignoring the feeling in the name of family peace. She was the one who was truly deficient in her ability to confront the truth. Anna, in her purity, did not have that option. The dissonance between the forced joy of the party and her grandmother's real pain was unbearable for her, and she had to name it. Beatrice's greatest reflection was on the nature of truth. The Pereira family lived a functional lie, but Anna proved that some truths cannot be buried forever. They leak out, they create cold drafts, they manifest themselves in inexplicable sadness, and sometimes it takes a mind operating on a different frequency to finally hear what the silence is screaming. Beatrice stopped trying to fix her daughter. She began to learn, from her, to trust her perceptions, to understand that Anna was not a broken version of normal, but a more sensitive and honest version of reality. The Pereira family story does not end with a cinematic reunion with their lost son, Pedro. Real life rarely offers such perfect ties. The closure is quieter, more internal, and perhaps because of that, more true. The truth is that the revelation broke the family in the way Afonso feared, but it also opened it up in the way Beatrice secretly desired. Family gatherings became less frequent but more honest. The myth of the perfect family was dead, and in its place, something more fragile, but more authentic began to grow. Lydia, freed from the weight of her secret, began to truly live for the first time. She took up painting, a passion she had abandoned in her youth. Her paintings were full of melancholy, but also of a new light. She and Beatrice, with the help of a specialized service, began a discreet search for Pedro. They did not do so with the desperate expectation of a reunion, but as an act of recognition, a nod to the ghost that had haunted their lives for so long. It was a way of saying, "You existed. You matter." Hope is seen in a simple scene. Months later, it is a Sunday afternoon at Lydia's house. There is no big party, just Lydia, Beatrice, and Anna. They are in the garden. Lydia is showing Anna how to mix colors on a palette. Beatrice watches the two, mother and daughter, finally connected by a shared truth, with no more secrets between them. Anna picks up a paintbrush and paints a blue stripe in the sky on her grandmother's canvas. Lydia smiles and says, "That's beautiful. What else shall we add?" "A star," says Anna, without hesitation. One that was missing. Helena looks at her daughter and mother and understands that their family, although different from what she imagined, is finally complete. Not because they found the missing person, but because they found the missing truth. And that truth, brought to light by the voice of a child who saw the world differently, healed a wound that no one knew had a name. Every family has its secrets, but they only lose their power when someone, often a child, has the courage to name the silence. The truth does not break families. It rebuilds them on a stronger foundation. If this story about the courage to tell the truth and the power of healing in families resonated with you, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Do you believe that families become stronger when they face difficult truths? Tell us about it. Share this video. It may give strength to someone who feels that there is something left unsaid in their own family, reminding them that the truth, even if painful, is the first step toward liberation.